Hiya! 1 second, just getting you straightened out. Oh, what a palaver. Oh! 1 moment. Oh. There we go. Ah! Hi! Hi everybody! Hello! Hello Marlene! I'm pleased that the comments are working already. Could somebody please just comment and let me know that you can hear me, please, and then we can get started. I'll just give it a moment until a few more viewers come on. And also to issue a warning, you may have noticed the scammers are already commenting. I don't know how they're getting in. Oh, there you go, there's one, he can go. So, I don't know how they're getting in because there's certain words and phrases and things that they're not allowed to use, so sorry about that, guys. Do our best. Hello, Deb from Canada. Hello. You can hear me fine. Excellent. Thank you very much. Woohoo! And I'm sorry, I must say I'm really sorry about having to do this inside. I was hoping to go outside, but it's really, really windy out there. And even with the special speaker equipment, the wind would just totally ruin the talk. So rather than ruin the experience for you, I decided to do it inside because I didn't want to cancel again. And also I do apologise for not doing this on Valentine's night. Some of you may not know that unfortunately I did have to go to hospital. Not on Valentine's Day, but a few days before that. I wasn't very well. The old kidneys were packing in on me, so had to go fix those first. But I'm alright now, everything's fine and dandy. Oh yes, Nicola, don't worry about the scammers. I'll report them and get rid of them afterwards. I'll just have to have another look at the page again, edit out some other words. Yeah. Lost my train of thought. Oh yes, so I do apologise once again for not doing this on Valentine's night. But ooh, we've got quite a few people watching. This is lovely. Thank you very much. So tonight is about the tragic love stories of York. When I say love stories, they weren't actually written as love stories, but when I've been doing a lot of research over the last year and doing lots of talks and things, I found actually there's an awful lot of what could have been happy marriages and various other things that have turned to tragedy. And I thought, well, this could be interesting in time for Valentine's, but obviously we know it's not Valentine's now, but hey, it's still the romantic month, isn't it? So I hope you enjoy yourselves. If you don't enjoy it, I'm really sorry. But you know what? It's a free video. We'll all have a laugh and a giggle. You'll learn something. And if you do want to see York in the flesh, I am going for a daytime walk Sunday? This Sunday? Next Sunday? I don't know what date it is. Probably next week. Whatever it is, check out the events page. It'll be on there. So you can see York in all of its glory. And hopefully it won't be too windy. But if it is, we'll brave the wind because I won't have to talk too much. It's just for you to see. Hi from Massachusetts. Thank you, guys. Right then, so let's get started. Now, for those of you who have seen me before, you know I have lots of notes and things. So I'm just going to pick these up just for a recap. Well, not a recap, but just to sort of tell you little bits and pieces and how tonight is going to go. I am going to obviously give you some stories, but first of all I wanted to tell you some romantic facts of York. And guess what, Mackenzie put them on the bottom of the page, I bet you. Yeah, there you go, it's at the back of the pile. Fantastic. It's because I was stressing about all those scammers, so I threw everything together and didn't put it all back together again. Anyway, so romantic things in York. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you may have noticed when I've walked near the Minster that there is a big grand window on the side of the Minster, and in the Minster's window you may be able to notice there is a heart shape, and that is actually the Heart of Yorkshire. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look it up online. The Heart of Yorkshire. And basically legend has it that if you kiss your love underneath the window, the Heart of Yorkshire, then you are destined to be together forever. So think very carefully, ladies and gents, before you kiss your loved one underneath that window. Okay? Another fun fact is that at the National Railway Museum, if you are a train fanatic, you can actually get married on the platforms. Yep, that is true. And you can get married amongst the royal carriages. And one of those royal carriages once belonged to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Now, obviously, we all know the love story between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. She absolutely loved and worshipped the man, and sadly, when he died, she was forever wearing black in mourning. Now, you're actually, funny enough, going to be learning about the mourning period and funerals and things in a couple of weeks' time, so do join me for that talk. But yeah, you can get married on the carriages at the National Rail Museum. So that's another little romantic fact. And for those of you who are familiar with Wuthering Heights, Wuthering Heights was penned by Emily Bronte, and Emily Bronte, she based the stories on the North Yorkshire moors, which of course are close to York. So, sorry, I'm just delete him as well. There we go. And so if you were ever out and about, you'll be out and about where the story of Cathy and Heathcliff is meant to take place. And finally, the last romantic fact about York is in the Castle Museum. The Castle Museum is home to the largest collection of Valentine's Day cards in the country. And it actually has the oldest Valentine's Day card in the world. Now, I've written the date down because we all know I'm rubbish with dates. But it was published, this Valentine's Day card was published in 1797, and it was published by John Fairbairn in London, and it says on the card, "Since on this ever happy day, all nature's full of love and play, yet harmless still of my design, 'tis but to be your Valentine." Ah, isn't that sweet? So that's all the nice lovey-dovey stuff of York. But that's not what you came to listen to. You want to know about the tragic stories. So here are the tragic tales of York. Now, your first tragic tale is about Tom and Nance. Married on a railway platform. I hope the happy couples don't get all steamed up. Andy. Good one. Tom and Nance. Now, if you've seen some of my recent videos, you may have heard this story before, but don't worry, you will hear some new stories as well. This is actually the second time ever that I've told this story, so do forgive me if I fluff a little bit. Now, this takes place in Sheriff Hutton to begin with. Sheriff Hutton is about 3 miles away from York. And Tom was a farmer, and he was destined to marry the lovely Nance. Nance was the love of his life, his childhood sweetheart, and she loved him very much too. But literally just 2 or 3 weeks before they were to be wed, a stranger came into town, a rather handsome rogue, shall we say, and he swept Nance off her feet and promised her that he would look after her and give her wealth and riches and luxury, and she would never have to work. And to be honest, in those times, that was quite a big thing for a lady, because you wanted to be looked after, you wanted to be secure. And being looked after by a supposed wealthy gentleman versus a poor farmer, as shallow as that might be, you pick the wealthy gentleman. Unfortunately, though, some time passed and she realised that this gentleman wasn't who he said he was. He was actually a highwayman, and he was already married. But he had his wicked way with Nance and left her in the lurch. Now, about a year later, Tom, who had since left being a farmer, he'd gone on to become a coach driver, and he used to ride coaches from the Black Swan Hotel down Coney Street. It's sadly not there anymore, but Coney Street in York. And Tom would ride from there to Hull and also to County Durham. Now, one day, about a year after all these events had happened with Nance, he was riding along, and it was quite dark, but just in the distance he could see a lady sat by the roadside holding a child. He then got closer to her and realised, this is Nance. And Nance looked terribly ill. She was deathly pale, she was dishevelled, dirty, and she was clutching this infant. And he shouted to her, "Nance, is that you?" And she looked up and saw Tom, and her face lit up. "Tom, "Yes, it is me. Please help me." And bless him, Tom, he was still very much in love with Nance, and he helped her into the carriage, and he took her back to the Black Swan Hotel, and he asked the landlady if he would take care of Nance whilst he went off on another coach job. Unfortunately, when he returned from his job, he returned to find that Nance was dying from whatever ailed her. And as she lay dying on her deathbed, he went to her and held her hand, and she begged him to forgive her for all that she had done. She explained to him what had happened and what a silly girl she had been, and that her days are numbered. But would he please look after her son as though he was his very own? And Tom looked down on her and promised to look after her son and raise him like he was his own. And as soon as he said that, she then turned to him and said, "Tom, also, I don't know if there is a life after death, but if there is, I promise you that I will look after you and anybody who is on those roads out in Yorkshire, just to make sure that you are safe from any perils." She then slowly passed away thereafter. And obviously Tom is devastated, absolutely devastated. The love of his life is now dead, and he's now left with the child that should have been his. But despite all that, he brought up the child as if he was his own, as he promised. And some years passed by, and obviously he's long forgotten about the promise that Nance had made to him. And he was out on a job in County Durham. In County Durham, he picked up 4 gentlemen, and these gentlemen had asked Tom if he would be able to get them to the Black Swan Hotel in York, because they were going for a meeting, a very important meeting, and they must be there by 8 o'clock at night. Now, Tom is very, very good at making his way through the dark roads of Yorkshire and getting back to wherever he needs to be on time, and he was very confident and said, "Yes, absolutely, I can get you there on time, chaps." And they promised him 4 shillings, and 4 shillings was quite a lot of money back then. However, everything was going smoothly as they were going back to York until the last 10 miles. Now, even on a nice summer's day, we can get quite a bit of mist in York, but this wasn't summer, this was winter, and the fog suddenly appeared from nowhere, and it was thick. So thick that Tom had to slow down, and he was going so slow, and then he was crestfallen because he knew that he was not going to get there on time, and he's not going to earn his 4 shillings. Excuse me, just get rid of him. There we go. He's not going to earn his 4 shillings. And as he's trudging through the fog, he suddenly, just in the distance, from what he could see through the fog, a little silhouette. And he got closer and closer, and this silhouette seemed to vanish. And then his carriage rocked, and all of a sudden some ghostly cold hands circled around his, grabbed the reins, and then snapped them, and the horses galloped into action, and off they went through the fog. Now, unlike the people who were in the carriage who were shouting, "Slow down!" Tom was sat there quite happy, and he was grinning wildly. He didn't look to the side, just in case he would be afeard of what he saw, but he knew that the very ghostly hands around his were that of Nance, and she was guiding him through the fog. And again the reins snapped harder, and he galloped off faster and faster and faster through the thick fog. Eventually, they made it to York. They got there on time with just a few minutes to spare. Oops, blocked the wrong person there, hang on. I'll just unblock her. Oh no. Oops. Sorry, Julie. I'll get her back on. There you go, she's back. They finally got to York with just a few minutes to spare. And bless him, Tom, he actually got his 4 shillings, and the gentleman were quite happy, and he was happier still because he knew that Nance had paid him a visit and got him through the fog safely, and he remembered the promise that she'd made to him. And he told that story to his adopted son and to all of his other children, and it turned out that a couple of decades later, Nance would turn up again. because it was said by one of his grandchildren that one day whilst they were galloping along, the horses reared for no reason at all, and they refused to go on down this road and galloped off in a different direction, and they couldn't control them. Then they got to another part of the road, and the horses once again jumped in absolute fear. And one of the sons, he looked across and he saw a lady just stood in the middle of the road, a ghostly looking lady. Obviously they were quite terrified, so they decided to take a different route, and they were heading towards Malton. When they got to Malton, it transpired that the road they would have gone on would have been a very bad choice, because it turned out there was 3 highwaymen lying in wait for anybody who was going to be going down that road, and they were going to rob them blind. So it turns out that Nance had saved their life yet again. Now, I like to tell that because I have heard in many other stories, and I could never tell you or pinpoint them, but lots of stories about there being a ghostly spectre that suddenly appears on the A64. Now, from York, you'll take the A64 as if to go towards Scarborough, and it'll take you to a place called Malton. And there is lots of stories about a random lady that just suddenly appears. But now I'm here to tell you, ladies and gents, that if you ever see a ghostly lady, don't panic. It's only Nance, and chances are she's there to help you. So there you go. I may have just cracked who that spirit might have been, because for years and years and years people were like, we don't know who she is or why she turns up. So that's a sad story, but fairly nice. This one's not nice. This one's a historical story. It's not a ghostly one. And I do like this one. Excuse me, it's a bit warm. I'm wearing a corset, don't worry. Got the heating on for a change. I'll just get my date. Oh, it doesn't matter about the date. Anyway, this is a story about Eliza Boardingham, or Elizabeth Boardingham if you prefer. Now, Elizabeth Boardingham, she married a gentleman called John Boardingham, and John and her obviously were once in love. They must have been to have gotten married, and she gave him 5 children. 5 children. Just get rid of you. And, excuse me. Over the course of the years, though, it turned out that John was not a very good husband. He was forever in and out of prison for petty theft, drunken disorderly, and he was just a layabout. He didn't have a job, he didn't pay his bills, he was absolutely hopeless. He was a terrible father and a terrible husband. So on one of his many occasions being placed inside the castle prison, what is now today the Castle Museum, by the way, if you're ever visiting, Elizabeth had had quite enough, and rightly so. And so her head turned to one Thomas Aikney. Thomas Aikney was quite the gentleman. He helped her out, he would pay her bills and help out with the children as well. Which is exactly what we all want, isn't it, girls? Now, obviously, they fell madly in love with each other. They really wanted to be together. But unfortunately, in order for them to be together, she needs to be divorced. And back in those days, divorces were very hard to come by. And if you can't afford a divorce, then you're stuck with each other. And if your husband won't give you a divorce, then you're still stuck with each other. John Boardingham, for all that he was a right bad un, he still loved Elizabeth. And when he left when he left the prison, he went back to Elizabeth and promised that he would be a good husband, and begged her to leave Thomas Aikney. Well, she refused and left her husband, and she went off with Thomas Aikney, and she was with him for about 3 months. Now, in the story, it doesn't tell you whether she took the children with her, or whether as punishment if she left the children with John, her husband. Either way, after 3 months, for whatever reason, she chose to go back to John, her husband. She was only with him for a week. But bless him, John took her back because he still loved her. And to be fair, who else is going to pay the bills? Because he ain't going to get a job. He's useless. Meanwhile, one night she slopes off to have a private night with Thomas Aikney. And she is desperate to get away from her husband, and she begs and pleads with Thomas to kill him. Now, Thomas, being the gentleman, obviously says, no, that's totally illegal. I don't want to have my neck stretched. You're just going to have to deal with it. Can't you just be happy with the way we are? And Elizabeth isn't happy. She wants to be with just Thomas. She doesn't want to be bothered with John anymore. They're useless layabout. She wants to just be with Thomas. And so again, she pleads with Thomas to kill her husband. And again, he refuses. A few more days pass, and she finally convinces Thomas to kill her husband simply by getting him incredibly drunk. Very, very, very drunk. And she then goes back home, climbs into bed with John, and feigns to have been there the whole time, because John likewise is incredibly drunk and passed out. Meanwhile, there is suddenly a knock on the door. And she wakes up John and tells him, John, there's somebody at the door. John gets up out of bed, stumbles drunkenly down the stairs, opens up the door, and there stands Thomas Akeney with a knife. He sticks the knife first in John's leg, pulls it out, and then slashes him across his gut and leaves the knife buried inside his stomach. Thomas then runs away, and John runs out into the street screaming, "Murder! Murder!" He then slumps on the floor, and the records actually say that his bowels came pouring out of him. But even so, he still somehow managed to survive until the next day. Sebastian, be a good boy. Until the next day. Sorry, the cat's gonna meow. Come here. Shh. Be good. Obviously, after these events, they quickly tracked down Thomas Akeney. Thomas has just recovered from being drunk, but is very hungover and obviously covered in blood. They arrest him, and he instantly admits to the crime. Because he knows he's guilty. He's not going to get away with this. And to be honest, he wants to go to heaven with a clear mind. He knows that he'll get to see a chaplain. He'll clear his mind and go with a clean conscience. But he's not going to go alone. And he tells the authorities the reasons behind the crime. And he says that he was pressured into this crime by Elizabeth Boardingham. So Elizabeth was also arrested. Both were put on trial, and Thomas was condemned to be executed by being hanged. Elizabeth had a special execution that was just for petty treason. This was a crime, a punishment that was just for women who committed petty treason. Petty treason was murdering your husband. And the execution is simply to be burned at the stake. But before being burned, they would do something called a mercy killing, which is to be strangled first. So what they used to do is put a rope around your neck, and as the flames were about to engulf you, they would pull on the rope and choke you to death, so that you would die before the flames got to you. Either way, a horrible execution. And it says that Elizabeth Boardingham was the last woman to have been executed in this way at York Tyburn. York Tyburn is where the Knavesmire, the racecourse, is today. But it's said on the day of the execution, they were on the horse and cart together, and Elizabeth tried to say goodbye to Thomas by giving him a kiss, and Thomas was having none of it. He didn't want anything to do with her. However, he did shake her hand and say, "So long." And obviously he hanged and she was burned and strangled. And that was the end of their story. So that's quite a tragic tale, isn't it? But it's a true story. That actually did happen. That is not a made-up story put in a book. That is real. And if you want to know more about executions and things, I've got the Hanged in York tour on my videos. You're going to be a pain. I'm really sorry, guys. The cat's yelling. You've got biscuits. They're over there. They're over there. 1 minute. I'm just going to quickly... Was this in 1971? No. This was in... I'm going to say 1700s, but I can't quite remember. I'm just going to give the cat his biscuits. 1 minute. You swine! Come here. You've eaten them. You can't have more. Oh, no. Oh, right, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. This is why I like to go out in the city of York. But I can't always because of the weather. Look, here. Have this and behave. I'll show you the cat at the end of the video, I promise. I've got two. I've got Merlin and Sebastian. I was hoping he'd stay asleep through this, but apparently not. But he's a Siamese, and if you don't feed him, they will meow and meow and meow all the way through the video, so no point. No point in trying to be professional now, that's it. Oh, quick tragic story for you, very tragic. The Golden Fleece in York. Anybody been to the Golden Fleece? Shannon, cats can be jerks. Yeah, these two can be. The Golden Fleece in York is said to be one of the most haunted pubs in York. And it's haunted by several spirits, but the tragic one is known as the Airman, a Canadian airman who was based in York. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why is there a Canadian airman from World War II based in a pub in York? What's going on there? Well, you see, the thing is, during World War II, we, the UK, the British, we were stuck. The Germans were definitely getting on top of us, and so the Canadians sent over their best airmen to England, and funny enough, parts of Europe as well, to help us out. And at the back of the art gallery, where the art gallery is today, in the botanical gardens and things, there used to be lots of wooden huts where the lads were based. However, some of them were staying in hotels and pubs and various other locations in York, and one was staying at the Golden Fleece. His name was Jeff Monroe. I nearly forgot, sorry. Jeff Monroe. Now, Jeff Monroe was a young man, a very young lad, very impressionable, but unfortunately, Jeff, he received a letter from his wife. And the letter said that she no longer loved him anymore, that she was leaving him for another man. Obviously, he is absolutely devastated by this news, that his wife no longer loves him, that she's going to leave him for somebody else. And he's thinking to himself, what's the point in fighting? When I fight, if I win and am able to go back home, what am I going home to? There is nobody there waiting for me. And so he decides to drink himself into a stupor, and he throws himself out of the window. And it's said that he threw himself out of the window at the back of the pub, went through a glass canopy and crash landed in what is now the garden, the beer garden of the pub, and broke his neck on impact. But it's said that his ghostly spirit is meant to haunt one of the rooms that he was staying in, and one of those rooms is called the Minster Suite. It is actually a room you can stay in York at the Golden Fleece. So if you do want to increase your chances of spotting a ghost, I do recommend it. He does like to make an appearance, and it's often said that whenever people look inside a mirror, they're doing the hair, the makeup, brushing the teeth, whatever, ladies and gents alike, they've suddenly seen a man standing behind them. Oh yeah, I've just remembered there's a reflection there, isn't there? They see a man standing behind them, and they jump, turn around, but there's nobody there. Yet when they look back in the mirror, he is still standing behind them in the reflection. Another one is that people are snuggled up in their beds, and they're sharing a bed, we hope, with a loved one, or someone they like very much. And that person's definitely there. They're tossing and turning, kicking you, snoring, farting, all that sort of stuff. You've all been there. So they roll over, and quite suddenly, a toilet will be heard flushing, and whoever you are staying with comes out of the bathroom. Well then, if you're going to see somebody that you know that's staying with you, who's meant to be in bed with you, come out of the bathroom, who is this? Nobody. There's nobody there. but there was, seconds, moments ago. Many have claimed that the covers have then disappeared down flat, or that they have moved as though somebody is getting out of bed. On one occasion it was claimed by a lady who was staying at the Golden Fleece that she rolled over and was met staring at a skeleton. Oh, I don't think I'd like that, would you? Yeah, staring at a skeleton. So that's the story of the Airman. Oh, now here's a new one I've not told you before. I'm getting chilly again, I'm going to put this back on. 1 second. Here's one I've not told you before. Next to the Golden Fleece, there is a street called Lady Peckett's Yard. Okay, if I remember, I'll try and point it out to you when I do my next talk during the daylight walk. Okay, but Lady Peckett's Yard is like a little snickleway, but it leads onto the back of the Golden Fleece, plus lots of shops and houses that would have been back then. And one of my old friends, he used to live in the top, what is now a flat above the Golden Fleece, or at the back of it, I should say. Now, his name was James, and James did not believe in ghosts, and he claimed he'd never ever seen or heard anything, which I find unbelievable considering where he lived, which was in a flat, a really old flat right next to the Golden Fleece. But he claimed he'd never heard or seen anything. And a few weeks later, or maybe a couple of months later, I bumped into him again, and he says to me, "Mackenzie, something's happened at the flat." I said, "Oh yeah, what's happened?" He says, "Well, I say it's happened. I actually haven't witnessed it, but my flatmate has. And it's actually a really cheeky story, so if you've got any kids, send them out the room for 5 minutes." Basically, his friend Peter, who was staying at the flat with him, he was laid in bed one night with Peter, and just above the flat there was the attic that they had access to, and the attic is really difficult to walk around because there's not really many floorboards about. There's like literally 1 or 2 boards that you can walk across to get to the electrics, and that is it. So you can't use it for storage or anything. It's a pretty useless attic, to be fair. But Peter was laid in bed one night, and he could hear basically what sounded like a lady being entertained by a gentleman, shall we say. We'll leave that to your imagination. Alright? So the following day, he goes to see James and he says, "Here, I'm impressed. How did you manage that in the attic?" And James looked at him blankly and went, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Oh, don't give me all that." He says, "I heard you. She enjoyed it, didn't she?" And he went, "What are you talking about?" So he went on to explain what he'd heard the night before, and James went, No, you must have been dreaming that." Anyway, few nights later, Peter was in bed again, and he heard it again, and he thought, do you know what? Just for a laugh, I'm going to catch him. So he got out into the flat area and went into the kitchens, grabbed the spare key, because apparently you have to unlock it, and then it locks behind itself. So Pete had the spare key, went upstairs, unlocked it, thinking, I'm going to catch them. Opened the door, and it was pitch black, and the sound instantly stopped. And he turned on the light, looked around, nobody there. So his cogs started going round and round in his head, thinking, well, what is that? What have I heard? Well, I know what I heard. And he closes the door, goes back downstairs, pops his keys in the kitchen, and he then, just out of interest, goes past James's bedroom and taps on the door, and James opens the door, looks at him and says, have you got somebody... Did you not hear what was going on in the attic? And James was like, "No, I didn't." But apparently this used to happen quite a lot. So, yeah. It appears that some ghosts have a lot of fun in the afterlife, apparently. certainly down Lady Peckett's yard. So there you go. I just remember that story when I was researching, and I thought, do you know what? It's not a tragic story, but I've got to share it with you because it's clearly some form of romantic love story, and I've no idea when I'm going to fit it in any future talks. So there you go. Oops. Right, I think the cat's gone to sleep, so that's good. So my next story for you is about Anne Lister. Now, has anybody ever watched Gentleman Jack on the telly? If you haven't, it doesn't matter. And for those of you across the pond, I'll tell you who she is. Anne Lister lived in the 1800s, I think. Yeah, 1800s. And she lived in what's called Shibden Hall. And Shibden Hall is out in Halifax. However, she attended school at the King's Manor. She used to come to York all the time to go to parties and balls and various things like that. But the thing about Anne Lister is she was, excuse me, for any children in the room, I'm pretty certain that everybody's open now, but she was a lesbian. And she had her first love with a lady called Eliza Rain at school at the King's Manor. But unfortunately in the 1800s and all the way up until 50 years ago, something like that, it was illegal to be in love with the same sex. And unfortunately Anne Lister, she would spend her life being broken-hearted because she would have lots of relationships with various different ladies. And she used to write diaries. Now, this is why she's so famous. It isn't just because of this. She is a diarist, and she wrote loads and loads of books, but she wrote them in code, and she wrote them so that people wouldn't know what she was talking about, but she was actually talking about her private life. But not only was she talking about her private life, she also gave us all an insight into the past. So we got to find out what it was truly like living in those days as well. So it's great that we've discovered these diaries and managed to decode them. But Anne Lister would spend a lot of her time being broken-hearted, as I say, because whenever she fell in love with a lady, she always wanted to be wedded to them. But it was illegal. It was not allowed. And ladies were considered to be okay to be friends. Now, it was not uncommon for ladies to live together, but a lot of that was because they were couples, but people didn't really think of them as being couples. They just thought they're just friends. Spinsters, and that's what they used to call them, spinsters, because they were unmarried women. However, Anne Lister used to fall in love with ladies who eventually would have to marry a man so that they could guarantee their future, guarantee that they would be well kept financially, and all that sort of thing. But unfortunately also, if gentlemen were caught in the act, shall we say, being in love with another gentleman was highly illegal, and lots of men sadly were executed, particularly at the York Castle Museum. I do think they make a point about that in the series, so if you do ever watch it, you'll learn about that as well. So it really was a terrible time to live back then, when we couldn't love who we wanted to love and couldn't marry who we wanted to marry. However, it does have a sort of happy-ish ending for Anne Lister, to a degree, because she fell in love with a lady called Anne Walker, and Anne Walker was really wealthy. Now, some will argue that she wanted to be with her for her money. Possibly, we don't know, but she did have a lot of money, and Anne Lister, she wasn't in debt, but she did have, a lot of bills to pay because she ran a coal mining industry. So she required to blow up some of the mines and do different things, and that would require money. So yes, Anne Walker would provide her with the money, but she did love her as well. And funny enough, there is a little church in York, and it's called the Holy Trinity Church, and it's on Goodrum Gate, which you can visit. And they actually use this church in the series as well, at the end of the series, where we're going to say they got married, but they didn't. There's a lot of discrepancy here. They had a blessing, or so they say, but they actually didn't have a blessing either. What happened was Anne Lister and Anne Walker went to church on Easter Sunday, as they would, and they took the Holy Communion and all that sort of thing. But whilst they were there, they exchanged rings and exchanged vows to each other in secret, obviously, and declared themselves to each other as being married to each other. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be a real marriage, but Anne Lister would include Anne Walker in her will, and sadly, some years later, I think about 6 years later, Anne Lister would die while she was travelling abroad. And Anne Walker would fall ill, mentally ill, so they say, and she actually ended up in the retreat. Now, I'm sorry to use this word, some people might get offended, so please don't be. The retreat in York at the time was an asylum for the mentally ill. However, it was far nicer than Bootham Hospital, and it was probably an asylum for the more wealthy and upper class people. But Anne Walker would sadly end up in the retreat, mainly because she was a woman and her family knew, or relations knew, that she had been having relations with a lady, and decided to send her there whilst they took care of the finances. So it is quite tragic in that respect that, ladies, we did not have a voice. We weren't able to look after our finances or anything. Your granddad was a gardener at the retreat. Oh, really? Daniel, I'll have to talk to you about that. So, yeah, that is the story of Anne Lister. But do look it up, guys. It is really a very interesting story about Anne Lister. My sister, she's a volunteer at Shibden Hall, and she knows everything about Anne Lister, and I regularly go to her just for little bits and pieces and say, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that? Now, not too far away from that church, the Holy Trinity Church, where they had their communion, their blessing, is the Treasurer's House. Now, the Treasurer's House is at the back of the Minster, so if you ever plan to visit, please do. It's a lovely, lovely house. It has quite a history. It is home to a lot of ghosts. But we're not going to tell you all about those stories, because they are on all my other videos, but I am going to tell you one. Once upon a time in the Treasurer's House, they used to separate the rooms so that they could be rented out, and there was a lady and a gentleman, a married couple, who were living in what is now called the Tapestry Room. Meanwhile, I'm really sorry if you can hear the cat. What do you want? Be quiet! Shush! Sorry. There's a room in the Treasurer's House called the Tapestry Room. It's a wooden panelled room with one massive piece of tapestry plus furniture. And it's said that this room was rented out to a married couple, and the married couple were not happy together, clearly. Yes, alright. Sorry guys. Listen, you promised me you'd be a good boy tonight, and you're breaking that promise. Here, eat these. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Shh. Where was I? Oh yeah, married couple, they were clearly not happy. They were not happy together. And the husband used to go out and get drunk nearly every night, all the time. It was a horrible waste of space. And she would obviously bear the brunt of his nastiness when he came home. He would hit her, he would do some horrible things to her. And she tolerated him, though, because that's what you had to do. You had to tolerate life back then and tolerate your husband. But the last straw came in when she found out that he was having an affair. And one night he came home and declared that she was going to get booted out and he was going to move in his new mistress. Well, obviously that didn't sit very well with the wife, did it? When he fell asleep, she then stabbed him to death in the room, the actual wooden panelled room. Now, it's said that her ghost is meant to haunt the Treasurer's House in that particular room. And never apologise for Furby. I'm sorry, yes, I know. I shouldn't apologise for the cats, but yeah, I'll show them later. It's said in this particular room that children see her ghost quite regularly. Now, if you go to the Treasurer's House, into the Tapestry Room, in the corner of the room, there's a little love seat, nice little love seat. And this has happened on multiple occasions, but I think the most recent time was probably about 3 years ago. And there was just a normal tour happening inside the house, and they got into this room, did the tour group. And in the group there was a little girl. She might have been about 3 or 4 years of age. Now, you are not allowed to sit on the furniture at the treasurer's house, okay? It's all antique, it's got to be looked after and preserved, etc. This little girl, she looked over in the corner of the room, waved, skipped over to the chair, and then promptly sat on the chair and started chattering away to fresh air. Now, her parents were mortified and were telling her to get down, you know, really embarrassed. And the tour guide was looking at her going, what are you doing? What are you doing? Come on, get off, get off. And the little girl just simply turned around and said, oh, well, this lady said I could sit here next to her. Everyone in the group looked at the little girl and looked at the chair going, there's no lady there. And this little girl was insistent that there was a lady sat there. But this is not the only time that it's happened. This apparently used to happen quite a lot. But also, interestingly, is in the room next door to the Tapestry Room. She's also supposedly meant to haunt that room. And in that room there's a dressing table with a mirror on the top of it. And it's said that if you look in the mirror, whether you're a child or an adult, whatever, if you look in the mirror, sometimes you can see this lady walk past you in the reflection. And it's only about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, my friend Mad Alice will tell you all about this one. In fact, I believe it's on her page, so I may just have to be cheeky and share her page to you afterwards so that you can see this. This is an actual ghost photograph. It's one of these stop motion photographs where you take a picture and you're standing still but everything around you is moving. That sort of photograph. I'm not tech savvy, you might know better. Anyway, this lass, not knowing the story, was around taking pictures, and she decided to take a photograph of this mirror. And she then looked back at the photograph and saw a figure walk past her. She then went downstairs to the reception, who, funny enough, my friend Mad Alice was working on the reception, showed her this and went, can you tell me anything about this? And Mad Alice freaked out, was like, oh yes, I can, and told her the story of this lady who murdered her husband that everybody can supposedly see in the mirror. So yeah, after this talk, guys, I will share her page and you can look up in her photographs and things and actually see the ghost of this lady walk past in this reflection. So that is your other terrible story. It's all about murder, isn't it? Now, here's one I've never told before, so please forgive me if I fluff up every now and then. I have practiced it and rehearsed it as best as I can. It's about Beninbra Hall. Beninbra Hall is about, I don't know, 20-minute drive tops from York, but it still comes under the York Vale. And now Beninbra Hall is a lovely Georgian build now, but it used to be a building in its place that was an Elizabethan house. Now, when it was this house, and I am going to quickly tell you this, whenever you read this story, which I'm sat on in my chest, sorry, a book by the National Trust, because the house is owned by the National Trust, nobody seems to know the date, and everybody thinks that this story is fiction. It's not. It's actually in my Tyburn tailback. Sorry about that, don't leave me. It had gone off just because of signal, so I do apologise. Yeah, I won't start, I'll just give it a minute. I'll strike pause for a minute. Come back everyone. Tell everybody on the page that I'm back. It's just the internet had gone off for a second. It's the wind. This is why it wouldn't have worked outside. I'm really sorry about that. Nothing to do with the cat. It's not the cat's fault. If somebody can just message and say that you can see me again, please, and then we'll carry on. Back now. Thank you, Carol. Cheers. Don't worry. We're all back. again, I'll just apologise about that. If there's no sound, refresh it. And if somebody can't hear that, then just comment and tell them to refresh the page, okay? Sorry about that, guys. Like I say, the weather's messing up with the signal, so if it does go off, I will come back, I promise. Even if the video cuts out completely, I will come back, alright? Don't worry. Going back to Beninbra Hall, so as I was saying, it's owned by the National Trust, but in their book and lots of things online, everybody says that they're not really sure if this story is true. Well, I can tell you now, it is 100% true. In the Tyburn Tales, that is a record of absolutely every execution that's ever taken place to a certain date, okay? And nobody truly seems to know the date, so I'm going to tell you the date. For once, I actually remember a date. This event took place in 1670, okay? The year 1670 at Beninbra Hall. Now, Beninbra Hall, it's said it was once owned by somebody called Mr. and Mrs. Earl. Mr. and Mrs. Earl had fallen out of favour somehow, and they ran off down south with plans to flee to France. But they didn't want to lose all of their belongings, their paintings, their valuables, etc. And so, in secret, they told their housekeeper, Marion, to please order the servants to pack everything up and hide it somewhere safe. Well, Marion knew that her fiancé who was, Martin Giles, was the gamekeeper there, and he has a cottage just in the garden. She could probably keep everything there, and when the time comes, some gentleman will come along and take everything away, probably get it all shipped off to France. Meanwhile, Marion's trying to explain this to her servants and to the house steward. The house steward was called Philip Lorry, okay? Now, Philip was a bit disgruntled that he hadn't been told anything about this. He was a bit hoity-toity, and why is she getting all the information from the Lord and Master? Why not me? And Marion just said, look, I don't know why I was entrusted with this, but you have to believe me, we need to pack everything up in this house and take it down to the cottage. Now, Philip also had a beef with Marion previously because he actually really loved Marion at one point, but Marion didn't want anything to do with him, romantically anyway. And obviously there was rumour that she was to be engaged to Martin Giles, the gamekeeper. So Philip already had a beef with Marion, and he wanted to get his own back. And also maybe make a swift penny on the side as well. So everything got packed up and sent off to Martin Giles's cottage, which was just in the gardens and the grounds of Beninbra Hall. Meanwhile, Philip sneaks off into the night to a local tavern where he found a chap called William Vasey. I think that's how I pronounce his name, Vasey. I apologise if that's wrong. But William was a notorious thief. He'd spent a couple of bouts in prison, and he had a very nasty side to him, which Philip was highly aware of. And Philip, turns out, he had a nasty side as well. And he spoke with William and asked of him to bump off Marion. And in a few weeks' time, once everybody thinks that the murder was carried out by her fiancé, we'll get shot of him, and then we can steal all the goods inside the cottage and flog them on. We'll make a nice profit. So that was the plan. So the night came when William Vasey lied in wait in the bushes, waiting for Marion to leave Beninbra Hall, probably to go off to the cottage and meet Martin. Of course, though, he then leaps into action from the bushes, grabs hold of Marion and stifles her cries, and he drags her off to the River Ouse. There he throws her in the river and holds her down under the river, and unfortunately, of course, she would drown. He then lets go of her, and off she floats off down the river, never to be seen any time soon. I won't say never seen again, because we do see her again later. He then disappears into the night and informs Philip that he has done the deed. The following day, Marion is nowhere to be found. And the servants in the house, they alert Martin and say, Martin, we don't know where Marion is. And he says, well, funny enough, I was expecting her to come to the cottage last night, but she never turned up. And so they all search the building, they search the grounds, and Marion is nowhere to be found. It's eventually decided that perhaps Marion has been murdered. And the servants and the local villagers and the people of York actually thought it was Martin, her lover, her supposed fiancé, that had done the deed. Obviously there was no evidence, there was no body, there was nothing. She'd just disappeared. But everybody believed that poor Martin had murdered his lady love, and he got an awful lot of stick from everybody. And so he decided to just hide away inside the cottage away from everyone until the dust had settled, but also being a bit upset about what could have happened to Marion. A few more days pass, and Philip and William have made yet another plan. Their plan now is to get rid of Martin, because Martin apparently hasn't been accused of murder and he's not been carted off like they first suspected he would. So William says, I'll go in there and I'll batter him to death. You lie in wait just in case anybody should turn up, or if I get a little bit stuck. So Philip waits outside the cottage. William enters the cottage. Meanwhile, Martin is drowning his sorrows over Marion, wondering what's happened to her. And then he suddenly hears the door creak open. And despite having a good couple of drinks in him, he sprang into action, and William was there with a bludgeon, ready to batter him. But Martin, thankfully, managed to apprehend him and got him knocked down to the ground and found a sheep's net, which he then chucked over the top of him and, funny enough, tied him up in the sheep's net. So William was somewhat detained. And Martin got hold of his guns and he poked the gun outside the window and let off a couple of barrels to alert the people in the house. Philip, who was outside at the time, heard the gunshots and thought, aye, best run for it. And so he scarpered. And the servants, they all came running to the cottage and found Martin with the culprit, William. William, of course, is then arrested and he's taken to the York Castle prison. And it's there that he is put on trial for attempted murder and for breaking an entry and for potential robbery. Whilst he is on trial, he actually confessed to the murder of Marion. Now that gets back to the house and to inform them that Marion is dead and that her body is floating around somewhere in the River Ouse. And bless Martin, he is heartbroken and he goes out in search of her and he actually finds her body floating along the River Ouse. He manages to retrieve her and he carries her in his arms all the way back to Beninbra Hall and lays her out, obviously very upset and devastated. And there they do the correct thing, get the undertaker in, etc. And she is actually buried in a churchyard not too far away from Beninbra Hall in a place called Newton-on-Ouse. So one day when we're all allowed back out, I'm actually going to travel out there and see if I can find her gravestone. That's if she's got one, because they don't always have gravestones from 1670. So William Vasey would be executed for the crime, the murder of Marion, and for attempted murder of Martin. But the story doesn't end there. Philip needs his comeuppance. So Philip, everybody has realised that he's a bit of a shady character, and you know, how did William and anybody know about all this? And they all started to suspect that Philip maybe had a hand in this. So Philip, in his mind, thought, I need to get out of this, and he wants revenge. So he's going to murder Martin and also still steal all the things that are inside the cottage, all the antiques, etc., sell them off and then make a run for it. Unfortunately for him, the mistress of the house, Mrs. Earle, she'd turned back up at the house saying, right, it's time to collect all these items. And Philip is there saying, right, yes, I was actually just going to check on them. But Mrs. Earle by this point has already been told the sad story of Marion and everything else, and she realises that Philip is not trustworthy. And Philip actually pulls out a gun on Mrs. Earle and attempts to shoot her, but he misses. So he then runs away to the cottage, and everybody follows after him, and they hear gunshots again. And Philip, they find, has blown his brains out. Rightly so. Doesn't matter whether he's hanged at the Knavesmire or blows his brains out, he is now dead. But that still doesn't bring back Marion. So Martin remained a gamekeeper and remained living in the cottage, but he decided, he was already in his 50s, and he decided he would never love another woman ever again. And he died a lonely old man. Now, I'd like to think that he was reunited with Marion. However, it is said that quite often there is a ghostly lady seen walking from Beninbra Hall all the way to the cottage, and others say that she's seen walking from the river where she was meant to have been murdered, and she walks all the way to where she is buried, supposedly, in the churchyard. So I don't know if she's lost and walking around in search of Martin. So maybe one day a medium should go out there and reunite her with Martin, and I think that'd be nice, don't you? So yeah, that is a tragic story, but it's a true one. It is a real story. It took place in 1670, and William Vasey was executed for that crime in 1670. And no, bless her, it would seem that Marion is not at rest. So if you ever do see her, let her know that all is well and she needs to go to the light and see Martin. I'm just checking on the other stories now. Right, that's that done. We've done Gentleman Jack. We've done Treasurer's House. No, I'm not telling you that one. Oh, getting through all these, hang on. Ah, right, here we go. I wrote quite a lot of bits of paper. There's paper everywhere. It's just, the house is a mess. And the cat's looking at me funny now. Yes, hello. Okay, I've got a little section here, excuse me, called Broken Hearts. It's just something I've written called Broken Hearts. These aren't ghost stories, these are just tragic crimes that have happened, and obviously they're still love stories, but I'm going to reel these off to you now. So these are true as well, these have actually happened. These are more records that I've managed to find from the castle. So on the 11th of April 1733, Elizabeth, a young woman who came from a good family, she fell in love with a man called John Addinall. I think that's how you say his name. Sorry. They had a very swift romance, shall we say. She unfortunately fell with child. Now, he promised to make an honest woman of her. A promise that he would make an honest woman of her by marrying her. However, he kept on putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And it says here that he was doing so very cruelly in the hopes that she would not carry to full term. In the hopes that she would, if I'm brutally honest, lose the child. So quite a nasty man. He wasn't going to fulfil his promise. Anyway, when she was nearly about ready to pop, it was obvious that she was not going to lose the child. She was going to become a mother and he would be the father. He said, no, I still don't wish to marry you. And that was a disgrace back then. Yes, you're right, Donna, it was a disgraceful thing. And so she actually ran out to the chemist and bought herself some poison. She then found John and said, if you do not marry me and make an honest woman of me, I will poison myself. Well, he called her bluff and said, no, you won't, and I'm not going to marry you. And so she drank the poison. She and the unborn child would die later that day. So that is your other tragic story. It's a short one. Like I say, these are the short ones now. Forbidden Love. Now, this was something that was discovered on the 18th of April in 1902. A dead couple, was discovered not far from the river near York. And the lady was discovered with her throat cut, and the gentleman was discovered soaking wet and also with his throat cut. And they found a razor close by, the really sharp open razors close by. It transpired that, and the couple's names, by the way, sorry, she was called Kate Bray and he was called Lewis Carter. It transpired that Lewis Carter was madly in love with Kate and they became a couple, but unfortunately, I'll start again, they wanted to be married, but unfortunately Kate Bray's father discovered that he was already married. So Lewis Carter was already married, and so from the evidence they found, it looked like they'd made a suicide pact, and that she was blindfolded. I forgot to say, she was also found blindfolded. So she had been blindfolded and he slit her throat, and he then made an attempt to drown himself but found he couldn't, and so he slit his own throat as well. So that is the other short tragic tale, a discovery that was made in 1902, just literally on the outskirts of York. Another one, Mary Ann Barker. Now let me think, is this the soldier one? Yes it is. I'll just get the names. John, Tom. Okay, right, here we go. In 1903? Yes, it is. In 1903, Mary Ann Barker was married to John Barker. John Barker was a soldier who would regularly be out on duty, so he wasn't often home. So, for those of you ladies who might be married to soldiers, you know that your husbands are away fighting wars and looking after your country. But you're loyal, aren't you? Well, she wasn't. she was a bit dishonest, and she shacked up with a chap called Tom Childs. Now, Tom Childs would look after her, feed her, clothe her, pay her bills. But meanwhile, John Barker, who was completely unaware, out fighting for his country, would send her money so that she could afford to pay her bills and live. Now, one day he came back, and obviously he noticed that Mary was not very loving towards him. And eventually she confessed to have been having an affair, and that she no longer loved him, and she wanted to be with Tom Childs. Tom Childs is a better man than you could ever be. Well, John is very upset by this, obviously, and he gets very, very drunk. And she goes out to the pub, she gets very, very drunk, and she's found by a neighbour, and the neighbour takes her home. And about an hour later, the neighbour hears a scream, and then she goes next door to inquire to see if everything's okay. And John turns up at the door, covered in blood, and he says unto her, "If you wish to say goodbye, she's upstairs." Well, the neighbour goes upstairs and sadly finds Mary Ann Barker with her throat slit on the bed, and obviously close by there is the knife. She reports the death, and this goes to the castle prison, so it says. And it's deemed that because he was in such a state with everything that had happened, that she had, had told him all these horrible things, that she was having an affair. It also transpired that she tried to murder him, and he murdered her in self-defence. That's what was said anyway. Now, I don't know how true that is. There was not any more evidence, but the court actually put it down to being manslaughter instead of murder, and he was given 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. But he got off after 3 years for good behaviour. And it then turns out that when he got out of prison, he went off to find Tom Childs, and he found him in the tavern in York. He attempted to attack him with a knife, and he managed to cut his face, but everybody in the pub apprehended John and sent him back to Castle Prison and said, "Here, he's just been trying to kill Tom Childs." And once again, amazingly, they don't put him down for murder. What they do is they make him carry out the rest of his sentence and then ban him from York and send him away. And I don't know if that's because he was a soldier or what, but it's all very suspicious and not quite the outcome that he should have had, really, is it? So that's the story of him and his wife. Very tragic. And your last one. This one I read in a book called... Where is it? I'll show you this book. It might look backwards to you, but it's this. I'll say this word. A Grim Almanac of York. And there's lots of interesting bits of information. In fact, every now and then I may just put on this day and post it online for you. But I found a story in there, and then I checked it out with our records. And yes, unfortunately, this one's true as well. Now, this murder actually took place in Leeds, but the reason why I've put it in the York talk, I'll reveal at the end. A young man called Thomas Malkin, he was aged 17. He was madly in love with a girl called Esther, and Esther, she loved him to a degree too, and they started a courtship. Courtship, as they call it. Unfortunately, after a couple of months though, Esther found that, you know what, Thomas isn't really for her, and she tries to break it off with Tom, and Tom is absolutely devastated, and he doesn't want her to leave him. And so one night, he asks to speak with her, and she was staying obviously with her father and family, and she goes to the front door and says, "Oh, okay, I'll come outside and meet you." About 20 minutes later, she then stumbles back into the house with wounds to the stomach and the chest, and she collapses and she bleeds to death there and then. She's been stabbed. And witness accounts claim that they saw Thomas Malkin outside, quite in a state of himself, covered in blood, and that they'd heard an exchange of words. So he was eventually arrested, and initially he denied the murder, but then with all the evidence up against him, he then eventually confessed to the crime. And he said that basically he loved her so much he could not bear for her to not be with him, and he could not stand the idea that maybe someone else would have her love and that they would not live out their life together. He couldn't stand it, and so if he couldn't have her, nobody could have her. So he was actually one of the youngest people to be executed at the Knavesmire, I think it was. Oh no, sorry, it was at the New Drop at the Castle Prison. He was only 17 years of age, and before he was executed, this is the reason why I put it in here, he actually wrote a lament. Now, I'm going to post this lament to you that I've taken a picture of on the page, because it's quite long and a bit wordy, but if you want to read his lament, you'll be able to. But I've just taken a little bit out of it to read to you here, and it's this. I loved her, yes, and could not bear to think she loved not me. And in his hopes to join with Esther in the realms of everlasting day. And then he was executed on the 6th of January 1849. But this lament is really long, so you're going to have to read it yourself. And like I say, a bit wordy for me to read out loud to you. There's a lot of Old English in there, which you'll soon see. But he wrote this lament and even carved his name and various other names and words into the walls of the prison. Now, there's a lot of carvings in the prison that you can see via the tours there, so when they reopen, do go on their tours and you'll be able to see some of these carvings on the walls of Castle Museum. And that is your tragic tales of York. So, yeah, a lot of them are death and murder, but what else is a tragic love story going to be? And like I say, I just thought of it for initially for Valentine's Day, but things happen, don't they? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you've been suitably upset by a few things you've learned. And go and have a look. Everything I've told you tonight, pop it into the internet. You'll find little bits and pieces about various things. Elizabeth Boardingham, you might find her name comes up as Eliza Boardingham. but it depends who writes it in history. Okay, yeah, you can go and look up all that. Now, I hope you've enjoyed yourselves tonight, and thank you so much. I do apologise about all the scammers that we've had. I don't know how they're getting through, because there is loads of blocks on the page, but you know what? These guys are crafty. So I apologise about that. But this talk is free. They always are, and they always will be. But if you did enjoy yourselves, we're in lockdown. We don't get any furlough tour guides. Myself and lots of tour guides are struggling. So if you did enjoy yourselves and you want to give me a couple of quid just to say thank you, please send me some pennies to the, let me get this right, paypal.me/Shadows of York. The link is actually attached to this video, so you can click on that. That is the only safe link to click. Do not click anything else posted by anybody else, okay? If you're really unsure, please just drop me a message and I will respond as soon as possible, or an email, and I'll send you a link that you can pay me to if you really want to. And if you don't want to pay, that's fine as well. I enjoy doing these talks. They are just a bit of fun, a bit of entertainment, and something so that you can all learn a little bit more about the darker side of York, the shadows of York. Now, who wants to see some kitties? Right, I'll grab you now. Oh, I'll just pull you off here. Yeah, I was wearing this corset for you tonight, so I was hoping it would show a bit better, but I'm sure I looked a little bit like I wasn't wearing anything. Ooh, sorry. Yeah, there's all my paperwork. Oh, and the thing I was sat on is full of all my books. So that's all the research and stuff. I've got dozens of books. Now this here is Sebastian. This is the one who was making all that noise that you heard earlier, and now he's sound asleep. Hello. Hello, Sebastian. Come on, you can wake up now and say hello. There you go. Say hello to everybody. No. Oh, big yawn. That's a big yawn, isn't it? So yeah, if you want to donate so I can feed this little boy, please do. And the other one is Merlin. I don't know if any of you saw. Oh yes, I forgot to say, thank you so much for voting me. I'm so pleased. I won an award, the Bronze Award for the virtual talks that I've been doing this last year. So thank you so much, you guys. It's all thanks to you that I got that award, and I'm really, really am chuffed. It is really hard to win an award like that with all the competition out there. So I'm really, really happy. Thank you for thinking I was good enough for that. That's really kind of you. And now here's Merlin. Merlin, say hello. Hello. Cutie cue. Yeah, are you going to play? No. You've got an audience. See? No. No, they're not interested. 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning they're interested, I'll tell you. Oh. Now what was I going to say? Oh yes, so yeah, I have to say thank you to them because they made a couple of nice little videos, didn't they? And they were talking online. If you haven't seen them, just scroll through the page, you'll see what I mean. They were a bit of fun, weren't they? So there you have it, and thank you so much for coming on this talk. I will eventually have a look through all your comments and try and answer some questions, because I don't always get a chance to look at the comments during the talk, and sometimes I don't always know the answer, so I have to dash off, pick up a book, find out. And this is the book I keep talking about, by the way, ladies and gents. Oh, hang on. Tyburn Tales. It was bought for me by friends of mine, Neil and Carol, which I'm very grateful because it is a fantastic book. This is basically the Holy Bible of all executions in York. I say all, only up until a certain date, because this was published in the 1800s, the late 1800s. So it's mostly up to date. There's only 1 or 2 things in there that are incorrect, so I double check with the archives and through friends of the Castle Museum. But otherwise, that book is quite complete. So if you do want to know more about the executions and things, then that is the book to buy. And Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll go and have a gin. Well, I'm not going to have a gin. I'm going to be good because obviously I was in a hospital with my kidneys, so I'm keeping everything flushed with water and cranberry juice at the moment. But I'll get a gin in the next few days. I'm definitely a lot better now, though. Thank you very much, guys. I was overwhelmed with the comments and well wishes that you gave me. And Merlin's walking up. Merlin, come on. Come in. No. All right then. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'm really blown away with the amount of people that come and watch these videos. So thank you. It's really, really kind, really nice, and it actually encourages me to do these talks because without you, I just wouldn't do them, obviously. And that's all I have to say. So I'm just scrolling through your comments again. Lorraine Miller, perhaps I could post some book reviews. Yeah, I will. I'll do that. Do you know what, actually, guys? I've got one spare book to get rid of. And it's called Yorkshire Women. I bought it twice by accident. I thought I didn't have it, obviously, and bought it again. So I might do a thing where somebody can win the book. Because it ain't cheap to buy, so I might do a thing later on maybe, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, I'll do a little review thing. I'll put a list of books to put on the page, and then you can go and buy them. There is one book that I read quite regularly, and it's called Ghosts of an Ancient City. Unfortunately, it looks like it's out of print, and it's very expensive to buy second hand. I've noticed some people say that to me in the past, so I am sorry about that, but maybe it'll come back one day. And yeah, raffle, Susan. I could do a raffle maybe. I'm not very good at that sort of thing. Right, well then guys, I best let you get back to whatever it is you're up to tonight. There isn't a right lot to do during the lockdown, is there? Oh, we've gone on for an hour and 20 minutes, there you go. That was long enough, wasn't it? So the next talk is the daylight walk, regardless of the weather, unless it's absolutely bouncing it down. Wind or no wind, I'll definitely go out so you can see what York is like in the daylight. I'm going to go to different areas this time. If you've not seen it before, do go back onto my videos, because there is another daylight video where I walk around Micklegate area and all that sort of areas. Words. And my next talk after that is about the Victorians. Now, it's something I was actually writing for the Castle Museum this time last year, but unfortunately with lockdown that didn't happen, and then sadly I was made redundant. But that talk is now going to be available for you. So I'm going to do my research just to refresh, and then I'm going to talk to you at home again about the Victorians. And the Victorians, we all think them as being very, very morbid. They weren't, but they had to accept death, because death happened quite a lot for them compared to for us today, shall we say. And they had some very weird and wonderful traditions, and there was certainly some very unfair traditions and stuff that they used to do, particularly for the ladies. So it's a really interesting talk, so if you want to join me for that, then please do. I was going to do another one about Boodham Hospital. Now, I'm sorry if you may have noticed I've cancelled that, but there is a really good reason. I dropped the current owners of the building an email some time ago, and I've been contacted back with the potential to actually go inside and take photographs and maybe do a video. It depends on what they're going to let me do. Obviously, though, we have to get lockdown out of the way before I can legally go inside this building. So I don't know when that talk is actually going to happen, but I thought I could do the talk outside, or I could get loads of evidence and photos and things like that first for you, which I thought would be a lot better. It all depends on whether these guys are going to let me in. They might not, but I've got the ball rolling, so hopefully I will get inside Boodham Hospital. before it's renovated and made into a retirement property. However, if there's anybody who's been watching this video that knows anything about Boodham Hospital, because they used to work there, and you might have something interesting to tell me, then please do. It'd be lovely, really lovely for you to share your stories with me. In fact, if you have any stories relating to York, ghost stories and things, then feel free to drop me a message, and I'll definitely have a read and reply and say thank you, and see if I can incorporate them into future stories, future ghost walks. Otherwise, thank you. Good night, sleep well, and I will see you all very soon. And I don't know what else to say except for that, so thank you. Oh, and I will put this video, an edited version, onto YouTube, so if you've got friends that can't watch the video on Facebook, I will put it on YouTube. It's not going to be tonight though, okay? It will be in the next few days, so you can share it. And if everybody wants to subscribe to my page on YouTube, as soon as I think I have to have 1,000 subscriptions. But once I've got 1,000, apparently I can then do lives via YouTube. From what I've read, I don't know. I'm not tech savvy, as we all know. But if I can do them via YouTube, then obviously lots of people that aren't available on Facebook can watch it there as well. But I'll have to wait until you guys all subscribe. Anyway, take care, lots of love, night night. Mwah. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.